You've probably heard the term cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, tossed around a lot, right? It pops up everywhere, from your doctor's office to wellness blogs. But what is it really? How does it actually work? Well, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most widely used and maybe one of the most misunderstood forms of therapy out there today.
But let's start with a question for you. Think about it. How much do your thoughts actually shape your reality? Have you ever been stressing about a work presentation and suddenly your heart starts pounding? Or you remember a really great moment with a friend and you can't help but smile? That right there, that direct link between what's happening in your head and how you feel in your body, that's exactly what we're getting into with CBT.
So, at its heart, CBT is a form of talk therapy that helps you tune in to those automatic negative thoughts. You know the ones. The goal is to learn how to see tough situations more clearly, and then, most importantly, respond to them in a healthier, more effective way. It's not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about breaking the unhelpful thought cycles and behaviors that keep you feeling stuck.
All right, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll nail down what CBT is. Then we'll look at its history, the 3 waves of its development. We'll get into the nuts and bolts of how it works, see where it's actually used in the real world, and finally, we'll take a fair look at some of the criticisms.
Okay, let's dive right into part 1. What is CBT? What is the big idea here?
So unlike some therapies that might spend years digging into your childhood, CBT is very problem-focused. It looks at what's challenging you right now, and it's action-oriented. The whole thing is built on this idea that our own minds can kind of trick us. These thought distortions, the little stories we tell ourselves that aren't quite true, and the unhelpful behaviors we've learned along the way, well, they're often the real roots of our psychological struggles.
So where did all this come from? Let's get into part 2, the origin story of CBT. Because it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually evolved in 3 pretty distinct waves. This is actually pretty fascinating when you break it down. The first wave, back in the day, was all about behavior, just pure observable actions and conditioning. Think Pavlov's dogs. Then, in the 60s, the cognitive revolution happened. This is when pioneers like Aaron Beck came along and said, hey, wait a minute, what people think is just as important as what they do. That combination gave us the classic CBT we know. And now, we're in the 3rd wave, which brings in ideas like mindfulness and acceptance, a lot of it influenced by Eastern philosophies like Buddhism. The idea here is to change our relationship with our thoughts, not just fight them. So you see, CBT isn't just one single thing. It's always growing and evolving.
And this idea isn't even new. I mean, check out this quote from Aaron Beck himself. He points out that the basic principle, that it's our perception of things, not the things themselves, that causes our suffering, that goes all the way back to the ancient Stoic philosophers in Greece and Rome. Wild, right?
Okay, so that brings us to part 3, the mechanism. How does a therapist actually take these ideas and put them into practice? How does it work?
Well, the whole thing rests on a few core beliefs. The biggest one? Our thoughts cause our feelings, not external events. It's not the traffic jam that makes you furious, it's the thought, this is awful, I'm going to be so late, that sparks the anger. The therapy itself is really a team effort. The therapist is more like a guide or a teacher, and yes, there's homework. You've got to practice these new thinking skills in the real world to make them stick.
And the process is super structured. It's not just showing up to talk aimlessly. It kicks off with an assessment to figure out what's really going on. Then comes reconceptualization. That's a fancy word for helping you see your problems through this new CBT lens. After that, it's all about learning and practicing new skills, using them in your daily life until they become automatic, and then following up to make sure the changes last.
Which brings us to part 4. Where is CBT actually used? And more importantly, does it really work?
Well, the short answer is, in a lot of places. CBT is one of the most heavily researched therapies on the planet. And as you can see, it's the recommended first-line treatment for a whole host of issues. For depression and anxiety, it's a total go-to. It's also the top treatment for eating disorders like bulimia. It's effective for substance use, and it's even used alongside medication to help people manage symptoms of psychosis.
And look, this isn't just some niche therapy we're talking about. Its effectiveness is backed by the heavy hitters, major health organizations all over the world, like the American Psychiatric Association and the NHS in Britain, officially recommend CBT. That basically makes it a gold standard evidence-based treatment in modern mental health care.
But of course, no therapy is a magic bullet. So for our last section, part 5, we have to look at the other side of the coin, the criticisms, to get the full balanced picture.
One of the biggest debates is about just how effective it is compared to other therapies. You'll hear the claim that CBT is superior, but critics point to a big problem with the research. It's almost impossible to do a double-blind study for talk therapy. I mean, the therapist and the patient both know what kind of therapy they're doing, right? And when researchers reanalyze the data to account for that, they often find that while CBT definitely works, it might not be significantly better than other good therapies out there.
So there are some pretty valid critiques to consider. For one, some large-scale analyses have found that its positive effects on depression seem to be slowly getting smaller over the decades. Also, because it's so active and requires that homework, the dropout rates can sometimes be higher than in other, less structured therapies. And then there's a more philosophical debate. Some critics worry that by focusing so much on fixing symptoms, CBT might just be putting a Band-Aid on a problem without ever getting to the deeper underlying cause.
But in the end, despite all the debates, CBT offers us a really powerful, really hopeful idea. It suggests that the power to change is in many ways in our own hands, that our mind isn't just something we're stuck with, but a skill we can actually train. And that leaves us with one last question to think about. If we can really learn to change our own thoughts, what else is possible? What else can we change about our lives?